Welcome to Richplanet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall and I'm joined again today by Gary Heseltine. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you.
Now, Gary is a former police detective and has devoted much of his life to UFO research, and we're going to discuss on today's show one particular case which took place in Brazil in the 1970s. And this was a case where the military were involved because the members of the public were reporting some very strange phenomenon, and they were actually being harmed by beams of light coming down from the sky. So if we can just first mention where this took place, Gary, and when, what part of Brazil was it?
It's in the northern corner, in the what's called the Para region, state of Para, in the northern region of Brazil. And basically what you had, it's at the mouth, it's a small island with a town called Colares, which is at the mouth of the Amazon.
Right.
And basically it's a pretty rural fisherman kind of community, but basically the local people started to report that they were being attacked by beams of light shone down by flying objects, UFOs, that we would refer to. And basically people were being struck by a beam of light, sometimes multicoloured light, but it was generally in the area of the breast area on men and women, and also the neck, and it was producing like a puncture wound. And I think you've got I've done an image of one of the actual, it looked like a bite, but it actually wasn't a bite, but there is in the package that I've given you,
right, yep,
in the images down there, I think there's a large image of the back one there, this one here.
Yep. Okay.
Right,
So
this is an actual photograph of one of the wounds. Now this began occurring in the August period of 1977. So this is a long time ago, but this is arguably one of the best and most evidential cases anywhere in the world, and yet other than a few dedicated researchers, there's not really that many people are aware of this case or its possible strategic importance, for the simple reason is what happened was, as a result of all the people coming in and complaining that they've been attacked by these beams and which were causing injuries, obviously the people then went to the local doctors, and a doctor, Dr. Wellade of Carvalheiro, began treating these people, and she treated of about 80 victims during this several month period, I think a 4-month period. She treated about 40 of the 80 victims. Now 2 people actually were reportedly died of these injuries, but she treated many of the people with these kind of very similar injuries. Now, and she too herself, after being initially very skeptical of what people were telling her, i.e. some light in the sky shining a beam down, she was obviously naturally skeptical and looked for a logical explanation. But she too herself one day witnessed the beams coming down and people being attacked, so she too became a witness. Now the people started to leave the little small town of Colares, which is about population of 2,000, and started to move out the village, and they were complaining to the local officials, to the town mayor, the local police and things like that. So eventually the story got back to the Brazilian Air Force, and cutting a long story short, they decided to assemble a team, probably thinking there was nothing to it, to go down to Colares and set up observation points with a view to trying to capture these sort of UFO activity, and indeed they did.
And it was known by locals as vampire light phenomenon, or the suck-suck phenomenon.
Yeah, now, they called it chupa-chupa, which is suck-suck, apparently in Portuguese.
Now, let me just read this. It says, Dr. Wellade told Revista UFO that the wounds were 1st and 2nd degree burns, not over 15 to 20 centimeters in extension, and mostly located in the thoracic region. The most impressive feature was that the skin of victims assumed a rotten-like appearance, as if the attack had occurred days ago, even when they happened only a few hours before. Those attacked by suck-suck also complained of vertigo, pains in the body, shakings, prostration, drowsiness, weakness, hoarseness, hair loss, the scaliness of the injured skin, and frequent headache. It seems those lights took not only the blood from victims, but as detected also their vital energy, because they had no more forces to do anything. So it was draining them of energy.
Yep.
And it was, so these beams of light that were causing these injuries, it seems, were taking blood from the victims
At the same time, which
Right.
is a bit bizarre.
So were any, I mean, did the doctor actually find any loss of blood in the victims? Are we talking large amounts of blood?
Not that I'm aware of.
Right.
Not
Okay.
that I'm aware of.
Now, let's come on to the craft themselves then, Gary, or whatever these beams were coming from. Have we got witnesses who've seen the objects that these beams appear to be emanating from? Just tell us about that.
Yeah, well, obviously from an evidential point of view, we have a number of witnesses came forward, villages that people who'd been attacked or had seen the images. But where it, in terms of evidence, it gets interesting is when the Brazilian Air Force set up an operation which actually takes place and lasts for about 4 months. And basically it was under the direction of Captain Hollander, Orangi Hollander. And basically he went down with a team of Brazilian military, and they set up at various observation points. And during this 4-month period, they saw multiple UFOs craft coming in close proximity. And some of the documentation that's released, if you look in your pack, and I'll refer to a couple that you've got examples as well. We're talking about absolutely very detailed drawings. These would be by the military people, the witnesses involved. So for example, looking at the camera there, this is clearly a triangular craft showing appear to be 3 beams of light and its movements. Another one here where you're looking at real structure of objects seen as described by military.
So this one, it looks like a classic saucer shape.
Absolutely, you know, but
and
there were cylindrical objects seen, all shapes and sizes.
right. Now I would say it's possible, but I don't know this for sure, that let's say that the UFO, this disc-shaped UFO, is maybe something non-human, but maybe the triangle, maybe that was some covert aircraft chasing them. You think, or
well, no. I think some of the sightings, as reported by the military, are really detailed. And there was a program put together called UFO Files, which deliberately centered on the military, because how this became really well known is when A.J. Javad, the Brazilian researcher, and his friend Marco Petit became aware, they were contacted by Captain Hollander some 20 years after this had occurred, who then went on camera, on video, to say that this incident had actually occurred. And he went on to say that they were there for 4 months, and then suddenly, just as they were getting loads of great information, videos, they were taking cine film of the UFOs, close proximity, hundreds of photographs, the operation was pulled. And it was
Right.
Operation Prato, Operation Plate, but basically the operation was pulled, and he doesn't know why. But the interesting thing from that is that the documentation pretty much has been released. A.J. Javad presented something like a 300-page report on the actual military witnesses who'd done detailed drawings, who've gone on the record at the citizens' hearings in April of last year, 2013. But they then had a meeting, I think it was in May of 2013, and sat down with the Brazilian Air Force on an official basis.
Right. Now we'll come to that in a second, Gary. We're just going to go for a short break. More about Operation Prato after this. Welcome back. I'm talking to Gary Heseltine about Operation Prato, which took place in 1977. This was an operation by the Brazilian military, who were investigating UFO sightings and UFOs firing beams down, which was causing injuries to people's skin and even taking blood from these victims. Now then, Gary, these incidents were pretty much covered up until the 1990s. Is that true to say?
Well, I don't think anybody really became aware of them in the Western world until Captain Hollander, the man who led the military operation, contacted A.J. Javad, the Brazilian UFO researcher, and basically told his story as being the man who led the 4-month military operation.
So there would have been obviously people who were involved in the villages, and certain people within the military would have had knowledge of this, but it wasn't. There'd been no news programs about it.
I mean, there'd been
like
one or two local newspaper articles within that area of Brazil, but nothing on a national scale, and certainly wasn't known internationally.
So what year did A.J. Gavard start investigating this then?
Well, he became aware of it when Captain Hollander contacted him in I think it was in June of 1997, some 20 years after the event, and he basically went on record and said, "Look, I'll give you an interview. I want to tell you about what I was involved in." So I mean, we're forever in debt, but the story gets a little bit bizarre in the sense that Captain Hollander gives a very detailed video presentation for A.J. Gavard and Marco Petit, so we have that as an historical record. He is who he says he was. We can prove and verify that he was the military rank and he was well known, etc. But the strange thing is that was in June, recorded in June of 1997. In July of 1997, A.J. Gavard and Marco Petit released this story effectively to the world, and it starts to attract a lot of attention. But on the 2nd of October 1997, just 4 months after doing that video interview, Captain Hollander was found allegedly hanged in his own room in a possible suicide, and it was put down as suicide, and yet his family and the people that knew Hollander said this guy would never commit suicide. So there's some kind of bizarre element there, and some people believe he was murdered because he spoke out about what is a really credible evidential case, which could be a deal breaker, because Hollander said that there was something like 16 hours of cine footage and video footage that had been taken during that 4 months, and over 400 photographs. Well, so far to date, I think there's something like 40 or 50 photographs being released, many detailed drawings by the military witnesses, but the video, not one bit of video has come out, which could be the holy grail, as it were, the ufology, if it's as good as what Hollander said it was.
So somewhere in Brazil, possibly in the capital, locked away in a vault somewhere, 16 hours of footage shot by the military of UFOs firing these beams.
At close proximity sightings, absolutely. Loads of different craft, different shapes and sizes, seen by military witnesses and recorded on lots of cameras. Now, if you think about it, as UFO researchers, we all kind of look for this best evidence. Well, it would appear that the Brazilian government, or certainly the Brazilian Air Force, have got that. And indeed, I think it was in May of 2013, A.J. Gavard sat down with the Brazilian Air Force and the Defence Minister and said, look, we're aware of this Operation Prato. You know, we know that there's video, we know that there's a lot more photographs. When are you going to release them? And they have basically said, we will work with you, and in time we will release all of this material. So at some point in the future, we are going to get to hopefully see this video footage.
Right, because A.J. Gavard, you told me, has a very thick,
he presented
file.
It at the citizens' hearings, a big thick file.
In Portuguese.
And I'm going to see if I can get obviously a translated copy.
Right.
Because I think it's one of the very best cases in the world in terms of evidence.
Now let's just go into a little bit more detail on what these UFOs were allegedly doing to the victims. I've got some text here. It says, one of the movies that you've just referred to shows an 80 centimetre, so just under a metre long, UFO probe, which was pictured and filmed at night beside a coconut tree by Colonel Hollander's team.
Yep.
That probe was the same one seen in Colares, paralysing victims to retrieve materials, human blood and organic samples and minerals from the environment, according to information provided by the team in the field. So there's some kind of
experiment, it sounds like to me. That there's
so was this probe seen to come out of the UFO craft, you know, or was it coming down to the ground? Or
I think it's just coming down to the ground.
Right. So was this attached to the UFO then? This probe?
I think it's just beamed down, like it is a continuous light beam, as almost like a complete arm or beam coming down with an object at the end.
Right.
I mean, the as far as I'm aware, there were not landings per se seen by the villagers. They just basically reported at various times of the night beams being shone through the mud huts kind of thing, and the very basic kind of habitation they were living in. But certainly the military saw craft of many different sizes, and it's clear that this was some kind of, to me, experiment or surveillance of some kind. It's more than surveillance, because if surveillance by its definition means you're going to look at something, well, these aren't. This is an interaction where they're trying to retrieve something. And obviously it was for a reason. If there's blood going, if these injuries are displaying strange, like the showing deterioration within hours, that is usually days, that's odd in itself. So it implies that there was some greater meaning to this series of events.
And it might tie up with the modern day animal mutilation phenomenon, where we see these surgical holes in bodies, and we also see exsanguination. Exsanguination is a common thing in animal mutilation.
Absolutely, and I who knows what the real reason for these attacks were, but it clearly seems to have got a methodology, and certainly that, you know, people suffered a whole series of symptoms, and so obviously where blood is going, you've got to start thinking of, well, this is advanced technology doing something to the human body. Why? Is this part of an ongoing program for some kind of genetic manipulation? Who knows? But clearly there is something going on that was causing physical effect.
Now, in Brazil, I'm reading here that it was under a military dictatorship at that time. Is that right? And was there any influence from the US military, do you know?
I don't know, but there's an interesting tie-up that quite recently in UFO Truth magazine, Tiago Tichetti, who's one of the Brazilian columnists, and also writes for the Brazilian UFO magazine with J. Javard, he basically tells of a similar kind of story where two local people came across a craft that just contained two creatures. One that was clearly of a more animal type, and the other one was a more grey type alien, and both were recovered, and then it was all kind of covered up. Now there's a similar tie-up to that, because Tiago Tichetti later learned that the Americans did have a hand in involvement in that and turned up at that particular case in terms of officials. So I would suspect, as you know, as we've often talked about before, America, the most secretive government in the world, clearly the lead on the subject in the world. If there's any major case, the Americans turn up. So I would think that almost certainly the Americans turned up at Colares and had some involvement. Maybe were involved in the reason why it was pulled, because they were gathering too much good evidence, I would think.
And if anyone's seen my film UFOs and NATO, it appears to be that the Americans that were in charge of mutilated human beings that were allegedly discovered on Brecon Beacons and in other areas of the UK.
Yeah, and I think there is a Brazilian link there to a case where there are some colour photographs allegedly of human mutilation in Brazil. So this isn't a million miles away from what we're talking about.
I've got a map here, Gary. I mean, this is northern Brazil where this case took place, and we are, you know, maybe, well, it is the same country, but it's over 500 miles away. South of Sao Paulo was where the case you're referring to.
But I don't think what people will realise is just how big Brazil is.
Yeah.
So, you know, we think of Britain as like 300-400 miles long.
Yeah.
Well, Brazil is an absolutely massive region.
So tell us what you think the chances are of these videos ever being released, and what AJ Gavard is up to in regards to this case now. What's the recent developments of it?
Well, he has had a series of meetings with, I think, the Brazilian Air Force and Defence Minister, and they now have a set protocol that they are actually working with the Brazilian UFO researchers to start releasing some of the very best evidence. Because obviously, if you're a researcher and you hear that there is all this great evidence of video, then we want to see it, because we know the importance of what that could be if in fact it was as verified as what Hollander said it was. So he has had a series of meetings, and apparently, I'm not sure of a timescale of release, but apparently there is a tacit approval from the Brazilian government and Air Force that they will release this material in time. And what's important is that they acknowledge the fact that they do have it, and that's the key thing.
My hunch would be that because it involves human beings being harmed, if you look at comments such as Bill Cooper from the 1990s, where he said that human bodies were discovered, or body parts
Yeah.
on recovered sources and that kind of thing, that is what made them tie the lid down on the UFO secret, because it was such a horrific thing to release. So my hunch would be that if they did release stuff, they might release some images of craft, but probably not the more harmful aspect of it.
Well, no, and it's an emotive thing, really, because if you think about it, it is a terrifying thing if people are dying, if people are getting mutilated and bodies are turning up all around the world, then this is not something that governments or the Americans say would want to openly get out there, because there is the element of panic there. This is raising UFOs to a completely different level. There's one thing, craft being seen in the sky, but there's another thing if they're hostile. And if you think about the American take and the British MOD stance, which is they're of no defence significance, which in reality I've always interpreted, and what they've actually said is because they're not hostile. Well, this would be the actual opposite. They are hostile. If indeed there are human mutilations, as case in the Brecon Beacons, if that was indeed real, and you believe that it is, then that case would prove that there is an hostility to the ET presence, and that it would change the whole dynamic.
But the whole thing becomes classified.
Absolutely. And you could argue in some ways that there may be reasons not to panic the public about that, genuine reasons. So you get into, when people are dying and there is a hostile threat by one or more species, then it does change the dynamics, because you can understand why it would be classified. But the fact is, I think the public still need to be told.
All right, well, thanks for that then, Gary. We're going to go to another break, and after the break we're going to talk more about ufology. Welcome back. I'm talking to ufologist Gary Heseltine, and Gary runs an online magazine called UFO Truth. And just tell us where you're at with that at the moment, Gary.
Well, you should know, because you write for the magazine.
Right.
You're a regular columnist. You know exactly where we're at. We've just celebrated the 6th issue, which is a bi-monthly 96-page magazine, with an actually 120-page anniversary issue. What's really good is that the magazine is going from strength to strength. Obviously, there's many subscribers all around the world, but we really need to get the message out that this magazine there, and I want to make it the principal English language magazine in the world, and trying to get researchers on from all around the world, so that we can have essentially one UFO Truth magazine telling the real truth as it is. Now, it's a complicated subject with many arms to it, and we do our own various bits of research. But in terms of the magazine, it's going really well. But I wanted to just mention the fact that in August 16th, 17th, 2014 in Holmfirth in West Yorkshire, at the Civic Hall, the Holmfirth Civic Hall, we're holding a 2-day magazine conference. Last year, in November, just 5 months after the launch, we had the first conference, which you came down briefly at one point. We only had 4 speakers. It was 1 day. But this year, bigger and better. And
so how much is it, Gary?
This is £20 per day, or you can get a £35 for 2 days ticket. All available via the website www.ufotruthmagazine.co.uk. But this year we've got international speakers. Last year it was domestic speakers, but this year we're having the likes of Robert Salas, who was obviously former captain in the US Air Force, who was involved in the military silo Minuteman missiles that were affected by UFOs in the 60s. So he's a very important guy, truth-wise. Mary Rodwell, expat Brit, now living in Australia, but she's one of the leading people in the world dealing with contactees and experiences, and has her own organisation, ACERN. Then we've got the likes of Peter Robbins, co-author of Left at Eastgate with Larry Warren about Rendlesham Forest. Also was a witness at the citizens' hearings. He's coming across from America. We have Pia Knudsen, who's one of the regular columnists from Denmark, who I've met several times now, and she's a dedicated researcher doing very good work in Denmark. We have the likes of Roberto Panotti. He's the last person I've asked to be involved in. He's Italy's top researcher, author of many books, and he's Italy's top researcher. He's a very, very well regarded person. So he's coming over, and then there's the UK element. In fact, there's a certain Richard D. Hall has agreed to speak there, and that's back permitting, obviously.
I probably will be carrying on from the film UFOs and NATO and updating people on the research of that particular film. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important subject. It's not one that many people will be aware of, and it's important that we get that truth out there. And I do believe that there is retrieval teams all around the world, and I do believe that special forces have got at times used to do certain things, and it seems perfectly plausible that if there are animal mutilations, that there are human mutilations. I think there is a case there, and we shouldn't hide away from it. It is all part of the truth, and certainly the witness, your source, who we've spoken to privately, I believe your source is good, so it's a story that needs to be told. So that's good. Obviously, Alan Foster, who's a regular columnist for the magazine, and Steve Mera, regular columnist. So it's kind of like all the people who are writing for the magazine, and obviously myself, and I think there's Larry Warren coming down as a co-host, because he's obviously well known, and he's a good convivial, entertaining speaker in his own right.
All right. So what about if people wanted to stay for the 2 days? Yep. What is there any accommodation?
Yeah. I mean, basically, they would order the ticket. If you go to the magazine website, there's obviously a subscriptions page, but there's also a conference ordering facility. You pay via PayPal. You can either do the one ticket or get both days for 35. There's various options, and basically you then will be sent an electronic ticket closer to the time, which will give you venues to look at in terms of accommodation, and obviously car parking, etc., etc.
Right. Okay.
What I can say is, so far we're about 3/4 of the tickets have sold.
Right.
So basically, if you weren't aware of it, then I suggest that you have a look at the website and get ordering soon.
Right. And what's the capacity of the venue?
It's 120 seats per day.
Right. Okay. Now, Gary and I have spoken at length about how this subject is represented in the media, and in particular the mainstream media, and because clearly we don't think that researchers such as yourself and honest researchers into the UFO phenomena are represented properly in mainstream, and in fact situations can be concocted in order to trap people to show that their evidence isn't good evidence. Not only that, we have, in my opinion, the non-mainstream field, the UFO research field, in my opinion, has been poisoned with a lot of researchers who I don't think are genuine researchers. They're there to confuse, they're there to mislead, and they're there to put out spurious, non-evidenced fantasists, shall we say, and I could name them, but I'm not going to name them just yet. Because I'm gathering more evidence on them. But in terms of mainstream, say, entrapment or trying to twist the facts, you've got a few thoughts on that, Gary. Can you just enlighten us on that?
Well, one of the scenarios that I can see, certainly for mainstream, and at various times I'm contacted about, can you get involved in making a documentary, say for Channel 4, Channel 5 or whatever, and it's going to be about abductions and ufology. Well, one of the things that I foresee happening as a twist on a TV programme, certainly for mainstream terrestrial, is that they could attempt to create a false abduction scenario, i.e. an actor basically says, yeah, I've had this, and then it comes across to me as real or to other researchers as real, to try to reel us in. They provide information that says, I've done this, blah blah blah, and they want to see how we research it. I can certainly see that as a scenario, but and the reason why I see it as a scenario is that I can see a TV company trying to dupe well-known researchers, certainly about the abduction phenomena, which is obviously loaded, and unless you've got implant evidence or something like that, or marks on the body, it's often word only. So with the abduction phenomena, what I can foresee is that a TV company at some point may try to set up well-known researchers with a false story to try to reel them in, as if to say at the end of the programme, these researchers fell hook, line and sinker, just accepted everything that the alleged abductee was saying, and they were duped, because we can now reveal that this was an actor, and so this is what the abduction phenomenon is. And I see that as a possible ploy. Whether it's happening now, I don't know, but I certainly think that it's a possible ploy that could happen now or in the future.
Now, what you said there, Gary, might sound a little bit cryptic to someone watching, but we're waiting for something to happen, and if it happens, then you can speak more about this. What we're talking about.
I'm being cryptic because this is possibly an ongoing story, and we're not quite sure. But what I would say in my own case is that I have been dealing with a case, a person that's put out a story, an alleged possible abduction, which on the face of it sounded credible, but as time has gone on, I don't believe is credible, and there's a number of things that happened that don't add up to me, and I've backed away from the investigation. And I certainly know of another researcher who was approached by the same person. So whether this is a ploy, I don't know, but what I would say is that in mine and the other researchers' point of view, we both got cottoned on to what's going on, and it feels like a bit of a setup.
Right. And you think that there's a chance that if it is a setup, it's possibly being set up by a mainstream production which may be coming on TV in the future, but you don't know that.
No, I've got to be very guarded, but my suspicion is that somebody's tried to set me up, and another researcher as well. Might be completely wrong, so therefore I'm not mentioning the company. It would be wrong to do so, but time will tell whether this is true or not.
Right, okay. Join us after this. Welcome back. Now, we've touched on the subject of disinformation, Gary, and I'll provide one example of a piece of disinformation which I think probably worked extremely well, and people can perhaps start to get an understanding of how disinformation works. Many people are aware of the alien autopsy. Well, there was a film in 2006 which featured Ant Dec,
yeah,
and then also the 1994 video made by Ray Santilli of this alleged alien autopsy, which was shown at particular UFO conferences first. It was
put out as real.
Big song and dance. We've got this alien autopsy footage, and it was proven to be fake. However, if you look at people such as Philip J. Corso and another chap who I'm going to talk about in another show called Edgar Fouché, they had information or intelligence in particular documents about an alleged autopsy, because if you research the Roswell story, there's vast amounts of concrete evidence that Roswell was a real event.
Oh, absolutely.
It freaked out the military in the United States at that time. A cover-up was ordered. It was and
almost certainly, had they recovered bodies, which we do believe that they did, they would have done autopsies, because they would have wanted to know the physiology of these aliens.
Yeah,
that's what we would do.
And there was allegedly 4 or 5 beings that were identical.
Yeah,
absolutely identical genetically, I think. Various characteristics. I think they were about 4 feet tall. Now, there's a lot of testimony from people like Corso and others, Glenn Dennis, who worked at the morgue, people like that, and there's the nurse's testimony. So there's a lot of testimony that alien autopsies did take place.
Absolutely.
Right now,
it's what we would do. If we came across an alien in our garden, the biologist would come away and say, look, I want to examine this. Yeah. It's only what we would do.
Now, there's documents being produced by researchers before the Ray Santilli footage. Now, Edgar Fouché suggests that what happened there is that a copy of the real autopsy video got into a particular the wrong hands, or someone got a copy of a copy. Somehow it was leaked, and they weren't sure whether this was going to be made public. So what they did, they sponsored and paid someone to make a very close copy with a fake alien, and put in several things which would make the thing debunkable, which people could say that it's not genuine because of X, Y, and Z. So they put those things in so that if at some point in the future that video ever did surface or detailed testimony came out from a credible whistleblower, they've completely poisoned the case.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I think the alien autopsy Ray Santulli footage was a classic piece of disinformation to muddy the waters and to divert people's attention from probably the real story of Roswell, etc., and the fact that there probably had been real autopsies. The disinformation works tremendously well, and what the public need to realise is that whenever we talk about UFOs, we should always talk about UFOs and ufology and set it in its context. Nothing is ever as it appears in ufology. So you can't just pick up a book and say this is the history of ufology. There are many different layers because this is dealing with things that governments and certainly the Americans do not want the public to ever really know what's the best evidence of what's gone on. So I think that those people who got involved in the Santulli footage was a deliberately ploy, disinformation to actually kind of like rubbish the whole thing and trivialise it in the media.
As they say, the best lie is one that is very close to the truth.
Oh, absolutely, it's a fine line.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to stick my neck out, and because I think similar things have gone on in the UK with regards trying to put disinformation about, say, secret bases or mind control or super soldiers and all of that kind of thing. And one claim is that there is an underground facility at a place called Peasmore. Now this has been put out by one particular researcher who I won't name just yet, but I've done my own investigation into that area, completely separate from any claim. Now I have found several pieces of evidence, nothing to do with Barry King, okay, several pieces of evidence which I've got, which tells me that there is an underground facility at Peasmore. But I don't think there's aliens there, I don't think there's trip seats there, and I don't think what Barry King says is there. But I think there is something there. In my opinion, there's something important at Peasmore under the ground, and the Barry King material has been put out in advance in case any genuine whistleblower comes forward and speaks about that base, because okay, some people will believe Barry King that there's reptilians and greys and seats that people get put in to read their mind and this kind of thing, and programmable life forms that are being grown in vats and this kind of stuff. Some people will believe that, and they will believe just his word on that, okay? Most people won't believe it. But if a whistleblower come out talking about a base at Peasmore now, a credible whistleblower, a military whistleblower or a scientist, their information would be laughed at because the Barry King story is already out there and it's on the internet. And it's similar to the Ray Santulli disinformation.
I think it's a classic disinformation tool, is that if you're really worried about a particular place, a particular story, you put out a cover story to muddy the waters. And if you think about Rendlesham Forest, that's exactly what we think has gone on, is that the interrogations, that the Larry Warren story, Colonel Hull has always said that Larry Warren was messed with and that he was implanted with a false memory. Larry Warren absolutely believes it. I've talked to him and he absolutely believes it. But at the same token, he knows that his mind was messed with, so he can't say for certain. He believes it was real, but he doesn't know. So, but we talk about the binary codes and Jim Penniston. Well, when I did my research for UFO Truth magazine, I found that there was the Glimpses of Other Realities by Linda Moulton Howe. There was a partial transcript of his 1994 hypnosis, and in the book it actually says that one of the first questions is from the interrogators: can you see the binary codes? Jim Penniston replies, yeah, I can see the binary codes. Well, if that's the case, that's an implanted memory. Right. The interrogators are saying, can you see the binary code? Can you see the lighthouse? Yeah, I can see the lighthouse. Yeah, I can see the binary codes. Right. That is not fresh information. That's derived information when somebody else has mentioned it first.
So I mean, Larry Warren, Gary, a lot of the original witnesses say he wasn't there, but he believes he was there, and his story is different from the witnesses, their stories generally tally, they line up broadly.
Yeah.
But his doesn't.
But his scenario is complicated, and it's. I do believe he was there. I do believe he was at peripheral post, and I do believe he was brought into where the a lot of the people were waiting in a clearing, ready to go forward. Holt's team goes out, and I think then Larry gets involved in something. He gets interrogated several times, so we know that he's messed with. We know that Penniston was interrogated, given truth serum, that kind of thing. But there's people like Adrian Bustinza who partially back up what Larry will say. There are people who, like Steve LaPlume, who will say that Larry was there and this Capel Green scenario happened. The real question is, and rather than point fingers and say you're lying like that, for me, the Rendlesham Forest story is all about everything, and the good bits, the bad bits. You can't just like the bits that you like and miss the bits that you don't like. It's the whole story, and really, for me, all of the witnesses should really be working together and just saying, "Yeah, I might not necessarily agree with your part, but you're a part of it."
So in order to get Larry Warren to twist his testimony, let's put it that way, and mess with him, what do you think they've done with him?
Holt has always gone on the basis that to negate the impact of his night when he's out with his team, that the Larry Warren was implanted with a false memory that was so fanciful. The beings, the meeting, the Colonel Williams
were
floating outside kind of entities, translucent entities. But it was like so fantastical that it would negate from in a sense, the quality of what Holt was saying, who was a senior officer. Now, I don't know the truth one way or the other, but what I'm saying is I can certainly see and take Holt's perspective that's what the disinformation tool would be. Oh, we've got Holt here. Sure, this could be a game changer with his team. Beams coming down, beams into the weapons storage area. Oof, let's interrogate this young, fresh 19-year-old, fresh from training. Let's implant a false memory based on a bit of truth, because he was there. He was on the periphery. We'll mix fact and fiction. We'll mess his mind up, and it has messed his mind up, and he will say that he's traumatized by it even now. And if the story ever breaks, we're going to have arguments about the witnesses, and that, if you think about it, that's all we've had since. You've got different parties arguing with each other. But now we've had the binary code revelations in 2010 from Jim Penniston, which I feel very suspect about, because it just doesn't seem to me credible. After 30 years, you're going to hide this and then suddenly tell somebody. The one person for me who we should have told, who we could have told, was John Burroughs, who was with him in the forest. So when he says, who do I tell? I couldn't tell anybody. Well, he could tell John Burroughs, and he never did until October 2010. That, to me, as a detective, doesn't make sense. So, and when I look at the hypnosis transcript, for me, that when somebody says, can you see the binary codes first, then that's somebody introducing the subject to binary codes before Penniston voluntarily says, I can see the binary codes. It's like he's being led. Information is being pumped into him. So it could be disinformation too. It
might be true that an extraterrestrial or non-human civilization would use binary codes. I personally doubt it. So what were the binary codes allegedly saying?
Well, basically, the program was made for Ancient Aliens, and this is what they referred to when it came out at the Woodbridge conference in December 2010. And they were limited what they could say, but what the documentary went on to say is that their particular binary code specialist had looked at, I think, 6 pages of what was, in fact, 16 pages of binary. But it depends on who you're talking to. Sometimes he'll say it's 12, sometimes it was 14, so 6, which again, I think I'd know if I'd wrote 16 pages, I'd know it was 16 and always say it was 16, not 12 or 14. But the binary code specialist that the Ancient Aliens program used said that there were 7 locations, geographical coordinates around the world, including one, High Brazil, which is a mythical island off Brazil, off Ireland.
So do you know, see, if you're going to interpret a binary code into something understandable, right, you have to, how it's done on a computer is it's put into 8-bit ASCII code, right? So did it, Did he convert it into ASCII? Do you know?
I believe so. I mean, he was apparently a binary code specialist, and I'm not. But it was basically planetary advance, you know, like a continuing study. And Jim Penniston believed it was time travellers from the future.
But just, are you sure it was ASCII? Because
no, I'm not an expert.
You're right. It might not have been ASCII, because if it was ASCII, there's no way. There's no way an extraterrestrial is going to be working in ASCII code, because
I don't know. I'm not a binary code expert at all.
Right. Well, maybe I should look into that and find out.
Yeah, I think you should.
And then add it in, because.
But in the end, what I'm saying is, he made inconsistent remarks, Jim Penniston, and until his police pocketbook was given to independent researchers who could check the age of the paper for those 16 pages and the age of the ink to verify that they were 34 years old, etc. And now he says he's willing to do that, but I haven't seen any evidence that it's actually gone to any independent labs.
Right.
It needs to be done to have any chance of being accepted as a credible story. Because if it was in his pocketbook from 1980 and he could prove it through the quality of the paper that it wasn't added and it was the ink, etc., then it would add more credibility to what he was saying. But unless those tests are done, that it's going to sound like a real wild story that's come out just to make money, and that's how it looks.
So this is what he would term an automatic message that he got the binary code
from.
Yeah,
he said he touched the symbols and he got a download of information. Right. And the next day he felt compelled to write it down, and he felt a lot better when he wrote these 16 pages of zeros and ones.
But he never said that in his initial testimonies.
No.
So how many years is it before he came out with that story?
He didn't mention it until December 2010, when he told at the Woodbridge conference. However, the conundrum in all of this is that he was interviewed in 1994, and binary codes are talked about in 1994. So to my mind, how can he in 2010 stand up in front of the audience and said, I didn't know what they were? Right. Well, he knew in 1994 what they were, because when he watched the video back, if he didn't know what binary codes were and he watches it and he's talking about binary codes, he'd say, well, what's binary codes? And somebody would have told him.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
All right. Well, anyone who wants to meet Larry Warren, who was allegedly there at Rendlesham,
I do think he was there, and he's the original whistleblower, and I like the guy, but he knows he's been messed with.
Tell us where people can meet him.
He's going to be the co-host at the 2014 UFO Truth Magazine conference, August 16th and 17th, Holmfirth Civic Hall in West Yorkshire. Go to the website www.ufotruthmagazine.co.uk for all the information on how to get tickets.
All right, thanks then, Gary, and remember, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. I'm Richard D. Hall. Good night.